Welcome to PoliticKING. I'm Larry King. Last month, U.S. Representative John Conyers of Michigan introduced the End of Racial Profiling Act of 2015. The legislation is designed to enforce the constitutional right to equal protection under the law by changing the policies and procedures underlying the practice of profiling. That's helping to push for passage of this act is Representative Judy Chu, Democrat from California. She serves on the Judiciary Committee of the House, as well as the House Small Business Committee. She's the chairwoman of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. She's also the first Chinese American woman elected to the Congress. She joins me from Capitol Hill. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
You're backing that bill that will end racial profiling. How does it read?
This is a bill that will make it easier to prosecute crimes based on racial profiling. Also, it will require that there'll be training of federal officers, as well as the officers of local police departments that have federal contracts. And it will make sure that they actually collect racial profiling data. In addition, it will provide grants for those who have best policing practices so that they can develop it even further.
Would it make it a crime for a policeman to racially profile someone?
Well, it would make it easier to have some findings based on racial profiling, whereas right now it's virtually impossible, based on the old laws, to be able to prosecute somebody.
Aren't federal law enforcement officials already prohibited?
That's right. This is in the Department of Justice guidelines. They are not supposed to be doing racial profiling, but it occurs anyway.
When we hear the term racial profiling, many Americans think it affects African Americans, maybe Latinos. Does it affect Asian Pacific Americans too?
It also affects Asian Pacific Islanders. We have many immigrants who come from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other places. And ever since 9/11, there have been many acts of racial profiling against those in these populations. And in fact, most recently, Mr. Patel was in Alabama visiting his son when he just took a walk around the neighborhood. Well, a neighbor called about some skinny black guy walking around the neighborhood. The police came, asked for his ID. Of course, Mr. Patel didn't speak English. And as a result, Mr. Patel was beaten and had to be hospitalized and ended up being partially paralyzed. This is something that is intolerable, and we have to do something about it.
Does it sometimes provide effective law enforcement? Frankly, it sounds terrible that someone would be picked out just for the color of their skin. But does it sometimes prevent a crime?
Well, I actually think the opposite is true. I think that when there is racial profiling, there is more distrust with the communities that are there. There is more distrust between the police and the local community, especially if the local community thinks that they're going to be stopped for no reason other than their color. And so if we want greater cooperation between the police and the local community, we should end racial profiling and make sure that there is actual communication between the police and the people that live in that community.
Congresswoman, before the riots in Baltimore, a poll said that 4 in 10 Americans believe that race relations are worse since Obama was elected. Do you buy that?
Well, I do think that the cases of Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Freddie Gray have drawn a lot of attention. Thankfully, it's shining a light on racial profiling, and it is shining a light on the fact that there are many communities that feel despair. They feel that the middle-class dream is slipping by them and that they have no future. So we need a dialogue about racial profiling, and we also need a dialogue about making sure that everybody has access to the dream of a middle-class life.
But we elected a black president. One would think that conditions would be better.
Well, I do believe that he has made some steps in the positive direction. For instance, of course, his Attorney General, Eric Holder, has played a big role in revamping the federal guidelines on racial profiling, but we still have a ways to go.
I spent some time with Hillary last week at a party here in Los Angeles. You came out for her before she announced.
Yes.
Why?
Well, actually, I did support her in the first election. I have been following her progress, and I believe that she is even more qualified now than ever to be President of this United States. She has vast foreign policy experience as Secretary of State, but also I agree with many of her positions, including her position on immigration, which she announced just last week. It is so important to make sure that we fix our broken immigration system, and I believe she's committed to doing that.
Which of the possible Republican opponents would concern you the most?
Well, there's so many of them who to pick from. But I do believe that Jeb Bush would be certainly a great challenge because of his prominence. Nonetheless, I think that Hillary Clinton has a great deal to offer this country, and I think people will begin to realize it.
You recently wrote a piece for the Huffington Post titled "The New Segregation." You assert that entrenched inequality is threatening the American dream. Why does this exist at all?
Well, we actually face the greatest income inequality from the last 100 years, and the dream of a middle-class life is slipping away. We see that especially with regard to the latest House version of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It actually proposes such things as portability following every student for their education funding. In other words, if a student would leave a school district, the funding follows them, which would mean that our low-income schools would have even less funding, and it would mean that our education system would erode even further.
On an international basis, Russia staged a grand celebration in Moscow commemorating the 70th anniversary of the defeat of Nazi Germany, and Vladimir Putin was seated next to the president of China. Relations between Russia and China apparently getting closer. Should this be of any concern to the American public?
Well, I believe that we need to maintain our prominence as a United States that is a friend of many countries in this world. And there always has to be a balance of power in our world so that we ensure that no one country is dominant over the other.
Congresswoman, thank you so much. Always good speaking to you.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Congresswoman Judy Chu, Democrat of California, chairman of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus.